Welcome to the course on Theories of Addiction and Co-Occurring Disorders, brought to you by LCEUs.com. In this course, we're going to talk about different theories of addiction: moral theory, disease theory, learning and behavioral theory, and sociocultural theories. Then we're going to describe the theories of the development of mental health disorders, including cognitive behavioral, biological and genetic, and learning theory. Finally, we're going to talk about exactly what a co-occurring disorder is and how it fits with all of this. Addiction theories. The moral theory says just that an addiction is merely a matter of willpower. And if someone is an addict, all they have to do is muster the willpower to not use, and they will be fine. Well, there are a lot of people who do muster the willpower to not use, but they're not so fine. Addiction is merely a symptom of an underlying problem people use to escape from negative feeling states or pain. So we have to address whatever that underlying issue is. Otherwise, they're just kind of white-knuckling it until either they pass away or they relapse. So we want to see what we can do to help them live a happy, healthy life, not just grit their teeth and bear it and, go on like a trooper. Associated character deficits include gluttony, sloth, envy, pride, and anger. Now, if you think about an addiction, it's typically partaking in something in a gluttonous fashion, gambling, spending too much over a longer period of time, letting other things slide. Same thing with alcohol, food, sex. You get the idea. Sloth, not paying attention to the things that people in our society consider important. Your health, your finances, your family, your social circle, your job. Envy. A lot of people who are addicts are envious of people who are or are not addicts. They want to have fame, money, power. They think this will make them happy, when in reality, happiness is much more elusive. Pride. That comes and goes with addiction. Sometimes they think they're all that in a bag of chips, but mostly it comes in the form of being too proud to ask for help. And anger. To date, I have never met a person who was in early recovery or in their addiction who wasn't angry, resentful, irritable, or just plain downright nasty to be around. So yes, these traits are present to a greater or lesser extent in addiction, but that doesn't mean that if you deal with these things, and just stop using, things will necessarily be better. It's closer. When you look at the 12-step program, 12-step program is a very virtuous lifestyle. Honesty, hope, faith, courage, compassion, integrity, discipline, all those things are virtuous. All those are principles represented in the 12 steps. What we need to look at, though, is when we go back to these character deficits, why is somebody engaging in something in a gluttonous fashion? What's the motivation? Is it just because it feels so good? Or is it because they're trying to escape pain and this feels a whole lot better than the alternative? Why are they ignoring their job, their family, all this other stuff? Is it because all those other things suck? Or is it because they feel out of control and they don't know how to fix what's going on, but their job is going to whatever in a handbasket, and their family is starting to fall apart, and they're having problems? So my point is, yes, we see these character deficits or traits or whatever you want to call it, but we have to look at what's the motivation for these types of behaviors. Why are these behaviors more rewarding to a person than the alternative? Disease theory says that addiction is caused by a physiological deficit, which makes the person unable to tolerate the drug. Certain races of people are more susceptible to alcohol than others. They'll get red in the face, they get drunk a lot easier. Certain people are more susceptible to crack cocaine than other people. I've talked to some people who've done crack and they've just been like, it was what it was. And I've talked to a whole lot of other people who've done crack once and they've been addicted from the get-go. So depending on your body's responsiveness to the drug, you may be more easily addicted because it's way more reinforcing. It's way more rewarding when you take it. You're like, oh, I really want that again. Diseases are incurable, progressive, and fatal if left untreated. Incurable. Yeah, when the going gets tough again and all your coping skills are overwhelmed and you don't know where to turn, but the pain has got to stop because it's just excruciating, you may turn back to this one thing that you know has always worked before. It doesn't mean you will, but it says there's always a chance that you will revert to this other behavior if at a last resort you think, I've just got to make it stop for a few minutes. That's where sponsors, sober social supports, and other people, places, and things that can help buffer you come in handy. They're progressive. Wherever you left off is where you're going to pick up at. If you were drinking a 6-pack every evening when you came home from work, then you're probably going to rapidly get back up to drinking a 6-pack and then some. The body becomes tolerant to alcohol, to drugs, when you take them over a period of time, and you need to increase the dosage to get the same effect. The same thing is true with behavioral addictions. If a person starts out gambling and a $100 win is like, woohoo, over time, if they're an addict, it may take $1,000 or $10,000 for them to get as excited, for them to get the same euphoria as they did the first time they won their $100 jackpot. Addiction can also be described as something that is learned through observation and vicarious reinforcement and direct experiences. Vicarious reinforcement or punishment means you see it's happened to somebody else and you get the message. My cat does not learn. My cat does not learn through vicarious observation, reinforcement, and punishment. Most people or animals see something hot and see somebody put their hand on it, get burned, they don't go near it again. Or they do it once and they go, oh, that's hot. I'm not going to do that again. That's direct experience. Messy? No, not messy. Messy is going to walk over a hot burner anytime, and it can be glowing red hot and he's just like, oh, pretty color. But anyhow, most humans are smarter than Messy is. I love him to death, but he's, People learn through observation that addictive behaviors can be used to cope with stress, depression, anxiety, or anger. Think about the homes that most of your patients came from. They came from homes where the parents had a bad day. They'd come home and drink or use. When the parents were depressed, they would use drugs, alcohol, pills, sex, whatever. Same thing with anxiety or anger. You notice that children learn a whole lot more from what they see than what they hear. So if they see you getting angry and putting your fist through the wall, and you turn around and you look at them and say, little Johnny, when you get angry, I want you to count to 10. What do you think Johnny's going to do? Count to 10 or put his fist through the wall? Same thing with addictions. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that most of our patients never learned proper coping skills. They learned through observation and they learned through direct experience that certain things worked or seemed to work. They learn through observation of media as well as one another that Addictions, substances, can help you feel more relaxed and sociable. They can help you escape from pain. We see these things. We go, oh. You watch different TV shows and different infomercials and different this and that, and you learn a lot, or you think you learn a lot. People who find relief in a pleasurable behavior are more likely to engage in that behavior again. Well, duh. If you do something and it feels good, you're more likely to do it again. If you take a drug and it makes the pain stop, or makes your head stop feeling like it's going to explode, or it quiets the voices, yeah, you're probably going to do it again. So we have to remember that the behavior serves a purpose, and it may be the best thing the person could do with the tools they had at any given time. I firmly believe this, so I'll say it again. People do the best they can with the tools they have at any given time. So it's our job to help them sharpen the tools they have and put more tools in their toolbox, because what they have ain't working. Sociocultural theories go a little bit beyond learning theory and say that the initiation of addictive behaviors is supported by the influences in the environment, in social circles, from peer pressure, and in our media that tells us we need to have this car and we will be fine. We need to have this food and it's like having a hug. We need to have all these other things, when in reality what we need to have is much more basic, and that's shelter, food, absence of pain, and a sense of love and belonging. Mental health theories. Now, if you've worked in substance abuse treatment for any amount of time, you realize that most people who come into your treatment center have a substance problem. Yeah. They also have a mental health problem. Whether it's reactive, because they're coming out of their hangover or haze and they realize all the things they've done and they get really depressed or angry or anxious, or whether it's because they used so much that they burned up all their happy chemicals and they can't feel happy right now, or they can't modulate their anxiety. Whatever the case may be, we have to realize that it exists and we've got to deal with it right now. Will they need to be on medication forever? Maybe not. Will they need to be on medication at all? Possibly not. But you don't want to have a sober, depressed person who's having panic attacks every 15 minutes, because they're not going to stay sober very long. Likewise, you don't want to have a person who's depressed or not depressed and anxious because they're taking all this medicine, but they're also drinking at the same time. So we need to treat both of these at the same time. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit to co-occurring disorders. So let's look at mental health theories a little bit. Cognitive behavioral theory says that irrational thoughts and cognitive distortions can lead to negative emotions and reactions. In English, the way we perceive the world and the way we think about things can make us feel bad, or it can make us feel good. It's like seeing a glass as half empty or half full. Are you going to see the day today as being a rainy, yucky, nasty, icky day, and I'm just going to be depressed and miserable and nasty? Or are you going to see it as a day that waters your plants so you don't have to, and cleans off your car so you don't have to? Half empty or half full? A lot of people with addictions have irrational thoughts and cognitive distortions that see things as black and white and overgeneralize. For example, if you don't get a job, it's not that, oh, maybe this wasn't right for me, or I didn't do so well in that interview. It's, I'm a complete and total failure. I've let everybody down. I don't think that that's a true statement 99% of the time, that you are a complete and total failure because you didn't get a job. Now, if you've been fired from your last 7 jobs, you might need to look at something. Irrational thoughts and cognitive distortions usually take mountains, or take molehills and make them into mountains, or take something that is situational and make it global. It's everything. All the time I screw up, instead of, I've really been making some stupid decisions lately and I need to get back on my game. Over time, people learn or acquire thinking patterns. And a lot of times they learn these from their parents and from the people with whom they associated as they were growing up. If they grew up in a household in which the parents were always saying, "You're never good enough," then the child internalizes the message, "You're never good enough." If they learn to be critical and never satisfied, if they see this in their parents, if they hear this from their parents, then they're probably never going to be satisfied and they will always be self-critical. So we need to help them take some of these thought patterns and develop, for lack of a better term, an attitude of gratitude, and learn how to be grateful for what they have and proud of what they can do, instead of always focusing on what they don't have or haven't done. When problems arise, negative thought patterns lead to negative emotional reactions. If I think I'm a screw up at everything all the time, I'm going to feel pretty bad. If I think that, I really didn't do so well in that interview, I may feel bad for a few minutes, but the key is to turn it into a learning experience and say, okay, what can I learn from this so I do better in the next interview? You can't change the past, but you can learn from it. Biological and genetic components to mental health disorders have been proven. We know that depression and anxiety and many, many different types of mental health disorder can be or can have a biological component because of imbalances in neurotransmitters such as GABA, norepinephrine, or serotonin, which is why we have these wonderful things called antidepressants and, to a certain extent, anti-anxiety medications. But when I talk about those, I'm thinking more of your medications like Buspar, and some of your SSRIs used at a high enough dose have an anti-anxiety property to them. Xanax, Valium, those types of anti-anxiety medications are not used to help balance out neurotransmitters as much as they're used to help calm somebody down when they've already gotten everything out of whack and started to freak out. They're also highly addictive. It's thought that some mental health disorders are passed on through genetics, but you've also got to remember that our body creates these chemicals constantly. So if you've got poor nutrition, for example, your body needs carbohydrates in order to make serotonin. So if you're eating 0 carbohydrates, then your body's going to have a hard time making that. Or if you're drinking a lot of alcohol or using drugs that are causing your body to secrete more of your feel-good chemicals faster than it can make them, you're pretty much screwed. So good nutrition will help your body rebuild itself and rebalance. Water, not getting dehydrated, also helps flush some of the toxins so you feel better. Drugs are toxins. Cigarettes, caffeine, any of the drugs that we put into our body. So it's important to remember to drink plenty of fluids, eat a relatively balanced diet, keep your blood sugar stable. Make sure you get plenty of rest. Your body rejuvenates itself when you're sleeping. It doesn't have other things to do like digest food and yada yada yada, walk and whatever when you're sleeping. It can focus on replenishing your organs, your liver, your heart, your neurotransmitters when you sleep. I also want you to think about the last time you were really tired. And I think back to when my son was little, and he had colic for the first 5 months of his life. And I don't think that boy slept more than 3 consecutive hours. I was exhausted, my husband was exhausted, and when you're exhausted, it's a lot harder to be pleasant and not be snitty about things because you just can't take one more thing. and you start to feel depressed. Your body's saying, hello, I need a break, I need to sleep, I need to rejuvenate, hello. So, interesting thing about our bodies is usually when we go past that point and we're not paying attention and our body needs a break, we get sick. It says, okay, fine, I'll put you flat on your butt in bed. Addicts tend to not listen to their bodies and they just push on through that too. But if you pay attention to what you're doing and you're living a balanced lifestyle and you're nurturing yourself and taking care of yourself, then some of the environmental causes of depression and anxiety can be at least minimized. Learning theory says that depression, anxiety, and anger are often related to cognitive distortions and thinking errors. We learn to interpret things in certain ways, and we learn to interpret things in ways that either make us happy or make us sad or angry or whatever. It's important to remember that every emotion is natural and normal. It's what you do with it that can be dysfunctional. We get angry for a reason. It protects us. Fight or flight. The flight is the anxiety. So we get anxious for a reason because it protects us. Now, if you get anxious and you stew on it and you're just a nervous Nelly and fretting all the time, that's not doing you any good. That's just burning up energy for no apparent reason. Emotions are supposed to tell you, hey, get up off your duff and do something. Happy emotions say celebrate, keep doing whatever it is you're doing. Negative emotions tell you to stop doing whatever it is you're doing and do something else. Children learn through observation and direct experience how to think about and react to certain situations. If they get an F on a test, how you react will model for them how they should react whenever they fail. Do they freak out and call themselves losers and it's the end of the world? Or do they go to their room and think for a while about why they got an F and what they should have done differently? Or do they just blow it off and go, it was a hard test. Everybody failed. There are different reactions and children will learn from us. As adults, most of our patients are adults. By the time we see them, we have to help them reparent themselves. And one thing I like to do is I like to ask my patients, all right, we're starting over again. You're going to learn to reparent yourself. So before you do something, before you judge yourself, before you criticize, before you reward, when something happens, ask yourself, if this were my child, what would I say to them? And generally it's a very nurturing statement. And my response is, well then, why are you so mean to yourself? If you would nurture your child, why won't you nurture yourself? And the reaction is usually pretty positive of, oh, I never thought about it that way. When children are exposed to people who display cognitive distortions, they acquire those same dysfunctional ways of reacting. And that's when they end up in our lobbies and our treatment centers. It's up to us to help them see appropriate ways of responding and reacting. When you're in a residential treatment center especially, patients learn more from the way you react and the way you act at work than from what you say. Just like children learn more from what you do than what you say. Our patients see how we act and we react. And they think, well, these people are theoretically healthy and happy, so if that's what it is, then this is how I should act. In American society, most people with addictions have concurrent mental health disorders. Like I said, they may be situational, caused because you've plumb squeezed all the happy chemicals out of your brain that it has ever made, and it needs some time to make some more. Or you start coming out of your haze and you start looking at all the things that you've done over the past 6 months, year, 10 years, and you're ashamed, you're angry, you're sad. Whatever causes or is causing the emotional distress, we have to deal with it. If the mental health disorder came first and the person started using in order to self-medicate, that's vital to understand. I had one patient I worked with who had been through treatment half a dozen times before she finally confided in staff that she was hearing voices, and that's why she kept going back to using. When she would start to get stressed out, the voices would just get too loud. But she was afraid if she told us that she was hearing voices, that we would lock her up. These are all things that we need to be cognizant of and ask about in a very non-threatening way. Are you hearing voices? What's going on? What's the motivation behind your using? And they may not know, but at least you plant the seed, and if you ask about it in a non-threatening sort of way, then maybe they'll come back to you later and go, you know, I do really need to tell you something. Addiction may have come first and caused neurochemical changes leading to depression or anxiety, or changes in the social support system and the environment, which leads to reactive depression, anxiety, or anger. So if you start using and your wife kicks you out of the house, you end up homeless and you've got no money, yeah, you're probably going to be depressed. It doesn't mean that you're going to be depressed forever, thank goodness. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have some genetic predisposition to depression. It means that you've had a lot of losses and you have every right to feel like crap right now. And let's see what we can do to help you feel better. It's a slow process either way, but it has to be dealt with in a conscientious fashion to help patients understand the interaction between their emotional states and their desire to use, and their use and their emotional states. In summary, there are a variety of explanations of where addiction comes from. We still don't know. I don't know that we'll ever know. Most people with addictions also have mental health issues going on. Co-occurring disorders, or those things that occur with an addiction, and that can, we didn't go into it a lot, but that can also include physical disorders like hepatitis or fibromyalgia or any of those other things that are going on. But they must be treated concurrently. Otherwise, you may have a depressed clean person who's probably going to use again in order to not feel depressed anymore, or an addict who's regularly disrupting his environment, causing stress and depression. I had one patient who, you know, bless his heart, was the sweetest guy you'd ever hope to meet. And he was using crack cocaine, and he was also on Haldol, which is a pretty intense antipsychotic. And I confronted him, and I said, you know, Jim Bob, you're coming into detox, and you've been using cocaine pretty heavily, yet you tell me you're on Haldol, and that's, you know, a really dangerous combination. He said, oh, Miss Dawn, don't worry about that. I made sure not to take my Haldol before I went out and used cocaine. I said, oh, okay. The side effects of the Haldol were so debilitating that he really hated being on it anyway, and so he went back to self-medicating in a way that quieted the voices and didn't make him feel like crap. There's always a motivation, and treatment compliance and recovery is an art of figuring out what the motivation is for the current behaviors and what the alternatives are that can help the person live a happier, healthier life.